Thanks for joining us today. As we go through, hopefully most of you kind of saw a little bit of the keynote this morning. Kayleigh and I are going to really deep dive a little bit more into some of the things that we talked about. Do some quick introductions though first.
Cool. Kayleigh Lavorini. Been with the bank for about three and a half years. I've had a couple different roles. A lot of them have actually been focused on, started with self-service analytics, kind of transitioned to leading our data strategy team into product owner and as part of that space, and now I actually lead the entire space, which has been really cool, natural, organic growth, but always with a focus on how people interact with data and configuring and picking and positioning the right technology that makes sense for those people.
Awesome. Ben Rottinghaus, so I lead our data engineering and data management teams at Fifth Third. I've had a bunch of different roles, product side, warehouse side, platform analytics, so all in data the 15 years that I've been at the bank. So again, we're excited to share here today. Before we get started, a quick little story. Kayleigh and I were talking about hey, what do we want this to be about? What do we want our presentation to be? And so as good technicians, and I'm sure all of you probably have done the same before, what better way to do that than to ask ChatGPT, right? Hey, what would a presentation be? If I was given a presentation at a conference, what should that be about, right? And so we started to fine tune, and I think as with most things, when you ask ChatGPT, first you come away shocked that it has a really, really good answer, right? You think about the magic behind it. But when you look at this, right, it's spot on, right? What does it take to modernize your data? What does it look like? A lot of great answers. This is obviously just a summary, but a lot of great detail that you can get. But I find myself when I read these and I read any kind of answer I get, I walk away feeling much more knowledgeable, but I don't know where to start, right? It's not actionable. I don't know what my next move is. I'm great, now I know how to do this, but I don't actually know how to do it, right? So what Kayleigh and I are going to try to walk through today is really just sharing some of our experiences over the past couple years. We're going to walk through and share some of the realities we've had, some of the pains, the struggles, the good, the bad, and really just use some of our use cases to walk through and try to hopefully make it a little more practical for you so that everybody can, regardless of where you are with your journey, hopefully can get a little bit out of this. So, again, hopefully many of you heard the keynote. Kayleigh walked through this already pretty well. I'm just going to do the quick version in case anybody didn't, right, or if anybody's is doing the live stream. Our environment today, right? We come from an environment where we've historically had a centralized organization that did most all of the data work on behalf of teams, right? And so you end up with application or source teams that have the data, they know the data best, but they don't know how to publish data. They don't know how to work with data. And so they throw things over the wall to a centralized team, of which Kayleigh and I are part of, right? To collect, design, publish that data. Historically, that's looked like our core data warehouse at the bank that we've had for over 20 years. And then consumers leverage that data, and they think we, in our centralized data organization, know that data best, right? They come and ask us questions, right? They're like, hey, what does this mean? How do I report on this? What's this balance field mean? Sometimes we may know through some organic knowledge, but just through attrition and years of data work and collection of things, we don't often know. So we become a middleman and a bottleneck in that process, right? And so while it has worked well for us in the past, it really doesn't help us solve that supply and demand challenge, and it doesn't help the bank scale to where we need to go. So we've invested in teams to build out and to really try to help simplify our processes, right? How do we, the only way we can get to a point where we enable people who don't know data, how to do it, is it's got to be easier, right? You shouldn't have to have 10 or 15 years of data engineering experience to be able to publish and build a data pipeline, right? So we invested in teams. How do we make it simple? How do we do as low code as possible, or at least as seamless as possible? How do we embed governance? How do we make things more automated than what they've ever been, with the hopes that we can then feed that out to more and more people? So what that leads to then is our central organization, gets out of the middle from those users, and you start to bring application teams now becoming data producers, and they become one-on-one, and they're actually working with their consumers really for the first time ever, right? They get visibility into how their data is being used, and they can actually answer the questions that those consumers end up having. So as we go through and talk, this is a little bit of background of where we're going, right? This requires a really big focus on people, process, and technology. Kayleigh's going to intro us on that and start to dive in across those areas.
I'm actually going to go back a slide because I want to just drive. I know, sorry. Great work. I do want to drive home that our data strategy, again, so creative. When our leadership started to create the vision for what modern data architecture wanted to be at Fifth Third, a lot of it was pulled from data mesh principles. This is our version of how we're going to achieve not the architectural best practices that mesh wants to be, but it's really about like scaling our own bottleneck is creating federation. So the architecture is still a little bit more centralized. We become the central hub for the process and the technology, and then the enablement of people. So like this is our version of data mesh, and I think learning one is as we as companies and industries, right, probably represented a lot of different industries throughout here, as you start to go on this journey, you have to figure out what makes sense, what's pragmatic and practical for your organization. We're really risk adverse. We're highly governed, right? Everything we do from a data perspective has to be really tight. So our assumptions, maybe. Ben teed up people, process, and technology really well. That's a framework that we use internally for a bunch of different practices. But when we started on this journey, we're really excited. A lot of energy behind it. We were like, oh, people are going to love this. They bitch about data all the time, and they're just going to love what we're trying to do. There's so much opportunity to improve it. They're just going to love it, right? They're going to love it. Process. We can automate everything. Of course we can. The demand, no problem. We have all the capacity in the world. We can automate everything, of course. And then there's so much data mesh resources. There's ChatGPT. There's people to learn from. Like, surely someone has done it, right? We'll learn from someone. All of these are wrong, right? But this is kind of where we started our journey at. And it is a little bit more of an optimist way of thinking. But what Ben and I are going to do is we're going to break down each of these pieces and just talk a little bit about how we approach them, maybe where we started, where we've invested, where we've had successes, where we've had challenges. So I go back to ChatGPT. We're going to ask it, summarize the impact that data modernization has on process. Directionally correct, pretty good, vague answer. It has some things right. Modernization is going to require employees to adapt. It's going to require us as technologists to continuously refine process and technology. But what it's not going to get correct, and what it's not going to tell me is the places I should prioritize, the places I should invest in, the places that I should laser focus on to really move the needle so that I can get to where I'm going faster. And I think like those are the insights that we wish we would have had 2 years ago when we were launching some of these teams, a year ago as we were investing in different spaces. So this is just a different way to break down some of the pieces we show, and we call it our handshake slide. The collection of data, which is ingestion and your traditional extract load, your design, which is everything from your modeling, data architecture, actually building out your transformation code in your pipeline, the process of publication, which we've kind of had to extract that a little bit from when we used to do. Now that we're creating data producers, there's an expectation that there's a publication process too, right? Discoverability, registering your data product, and promoting it is part of being a data product owner. It's part of being a product owner, period. And then consumption. So I do just want to focus on, I'm actually just going to let all of these build real quick, a couple of areas, because I could talk to this for quite some time. The two places, again, looking back, that I'm going to talk through are the places that we've invested the most in from a process improvement perspective. And that is the collection and then the design of data. So again, go back, think about our outcome. We want people who don't know how to spell SQL to somehow magically become data engineers. Huge gap in the middle, huge gap in the middle. Either we're going to spend millions of dollars and a crap ton of hours training people, or we're going to figure out ways to make the process and the technology work in our favor to lower the barrier of entry for people. So the places that we have invested the most time from a tech standpoint and from a process standpoint is in our collection and design. So collection, we're going from a lot of our servicing systems are still mainframe. Our warehouse is on mainframe databasing technology. So we're going from way, way, way back to as cutting edge as we possibly can be at a bank. So where we used to be ETLing mainframe files through data stage pipelines into our mainframe data warehouse, now we've actually figured out a pretty decent way. We have a homegrown tool that does its best to commoditize ingestion, leveraging data contracts at the start. It's a completely metadata-driven process where the user can come to it and just predefine their data contract, pick how they need to ingest data. Is it a flat file landing zone? Is it off a Kafka event? Is it a direct database connection? But it's all through a web GUI. So it's something that's human-centric in nature, but it is driven and controlled by the rails that we require as a bank. That's actually probably the most mature out of all four of these for us right now. The second is design. It's the least mature, and it's going to be the hardest one to mature over time, because design is intrinsically going to rely on the business process, the knowledge of the business process. Today, we're in an environment, again, with the limitations of our warehouse technology, where we're heavily modeling and normalizing for storage, which doesn't equate to highly consumable data products. So we're flipping the script a little bit on how we coach people to model data for consumption, which solves a problem. It will create additional problems for us to solve down the road. But we're trying to tune the templates and patterns that exist, not just through our data collection framework, but also in our DBT framework, that help to standardize or drive engineers through a funnel when it comes to consistent design, consistent governance, consistent formatting, and things like that. So I'm going to pause there. If you have areas that you want to go deeper on or talk through any of the other areas like publishing and how we're handling the shifting of ownership to data producers, or a little bit about how we're treating consumption, we're building kind of like a 360 marketplace for our data that pulls together or aggregates all of our different data governance, metadata capture tools. But if there's areas that you want to go deeper, either of us are really happy to continue to talk through those. So process improvement is great. For us, it hinges on making the right technology decisions.
Yep. Thanks, Kayleigh. So as you're going to see, we'll jump over to technology, right? What is the technology that we need to be able to support those process improvements we talked through? I think, again, our ChatGPT answer, pretty spot on, right? You need to adjust for scalability. You need potentially some concerns around cost, security, right? All those are, again, they're accurate, right? But like, what technology do I need to be able to solve my business challenges? Again, something you'll need to ask yourselves as well. For us, again, I'm going to kind of walk through the journey, and what you're going to see is like it was iterative for us, and I think that was a key, right? We didn't go for solve every one of those processes at once. We tried to tackle and prioritize which ones do we need to start with, which ones are most important for us to solve, and ultimately, like, it doesn't matter about consumption unless you have something published that somebody can actually consume, right? So some of it is a little sequential in nature, and that was a little bit how we tackled it, right? So we're coming from an on-prem environment. Again, bank, our cloud maturity is on the earlier side compared to probably everyone else here. I doubt there's going to be many that are less mature than us. But you know what? Security is great when you're on-prem. You don't have to worry about a whole lot, right? But lacking scalability, lacking reusability. So again, we all know a lot of the challenges there. Our first step, probably 3-ish years ago or so now, was starting to go down the Snowflake route, right? That was key for us to help solve that scalability challenge. But now security becomes a challenge, right? So while I solve one thing, again, bank, very risk averse, early in our cloud maturity and adoption, our security folks were all over it saying like, no data, you can't read any of it. It's all got to be obfuscated. It's all got to be tokenized, right? And we've gotten to a good spot, but it's taken a lot of work. Tokenization has been hard. And we've gone through multiple iterations of that to make sure that, again, like none of us want, me included, none of us want our financial information readily available in a cloud that can be seen, right? And so it is critically important for us and for our customers that we get this right. And so the early days of that, again, we solved it, but it was just really challenging, right? The ingestion is the other piece of it, right? When we first brought it in, we were driving everything off of use cases. And so we had teams organically start to build and leverage Snowflake as their use cases came up. We didn't try to lift and shift a whole big warehouse over all in one shot, right? We tried to gain adoption and gain growth through small use cases and get wins along the way, right? But what that led to was everybody built their own ingestion processes. So you start lacking that consistency. And when you need things like tokenization to be consistent, that doesn't really work hand in hand very well, right? So we went after the ingestion as our next step. Kayleigh talked about this one a little bit, right? We looked at building versus buying in this step. It's definitely a critical point for us. With the tokenization, with the requirements that we had, we went down a build route. That may or may not work for some of you, right? build our own ingestion frameworks and patterns that have continued to evolve over time. Started with NiFi on the back end. It's moved to more Lambda functions and things in AWS now, right? But it's been an evolution for that ingestion process. But you start to get standardization. You start to be able to embed things like tokenization more automatically, and the capture of that metadata, right? Being able to get those data contracts captured. And so me as a user, again, I don't want to write an ETL job. We're talking the people that can't write, that don't know SQL, right? Like, they're not going to write an ETL job. But you know what? They can define their file. Like, tell me what the fields are. How big are they? What's the data type of that of your file? Tell me where it lives. And you know what? We'll take the rest from there, right? We'll put it in our ingestion framework, pick those things up. And then over time, we've iterated on more patterns. We started with files. We went down Kafka, we went down database routes, and so we continue to evolve more and more ingestion types in our ingestion process as we go. So from there, again, we've now got data ingested. Next step, like Kayleigh talked about, how do you design? How do you build? How do you transform it in the cloud? And frankly, in our early stages, we did not use a lot of the benefits that Snowflake has natively to it, right? It was still a lot of SQL. It was using a lot of our other ETL technologies to read data, run SQL, populate it back where it needs to be. So again, teams started just naturally going down a task and streams route. A lot more native cloud capability, right? Running that directly in the cloud. So check, you get some benefits there. But we're starting to miss version control. You start to miss the governance and lineage, which is super critical to us, right? We need to know where our data came from and know that it's quality and that people can trace that all the way back. So introduce dbt core for us, right? Again, we didn't go to cloud right away. We started with core. We started with some teams getting the benefit out of dbt core. Again, kind of groundswell, got a handful of folks, worked through some of the pains of just getting it installed and running for people and getting people just up and running with it. But for the first time now, we get our development practices, right? Software engineering practices applied to data for the first time at the bank, right? And again, most of you probably dbt users, like, you know the benefit that you get out of dbt for the most part there, right? Picture our model though, right? We're trying to get this rolled out to lots of people, right? To teams of people that, again, aren't data engineers historically. And so we need the ability to orchestrate, schedule, but we also need that ease of use to be improved, right? So going down the dbt cloud route, right? Starting to get the benefits of orchestration, starting to get some of the extra capabilities that we needed. Again, we didn't start there. We started with dbt core, we proved it out, and then we started working through the dbt cloud side of things. So we start to get some of the extra benefits from dbt cloud. Learning curve still a little steep for what our audience is, right? For somebody that knows data, not that huge of a learning curve, but for the audience we're trying to roll this out to, there is still some learning curve, right? We're actively teaching people SQL, literally teaching people SQL, and then gonna go ask them to try to use dbt and understand what a YAML file is, right? Kayleigh and I joke about that all the time. Like, that type of thing can be learned, but it just takes a little bit of work, right? So the last part that I'll mention, most all those other steps is really about that kind of ingestion pipeline and building out the data product. We have invested in parallel in our data marketplace, right? So we knew coming in, well, yes, I need to focus on getting the data built and getting the data product out there. At some point, people are going to need to consume it, and we're going to need a spot that people can register, that you can understand who owns that data. People can list out SLAs, when's the data, where's it come from, who are the technical support teams. And again, that's no longer our centralized organization. That's the data product owners registering their data in our data marketplace and giving a spot that then users can go to be able to find data and figure out how to consume it, right? There's no check mark next to the consumption because, again, we're just on the early part of that journey from the consumption side, right? We're just now starting to have users learning how to use data products and multiple data products out in our environment and getting them registered in our data marketplace. So, like I said, this whole journey has really been that organic, iterative approach that we've driven to. But with every one of these steps, you heard me talk about the people along the way, right? And so they're a core piece, but our focus is how do you make this easy and how do you get it to people? And so Kayleigh's going to hit on the people side of it next.
My favorite topic. I'm an introvert by nature, so people are hard for me. But as part of this job, they have to be really important. So it's been a personal challenge. So again, ChatGPT, right? All it's going to say is it's really hard. I talked about it in the keynote. I think the thing that has surprised me the most is just the dichotomy of there are people who look at what we're trying to do and run away screaming. You used to do this before, like this is the enterprise data office's job. I don't know what you're asking me to do, right? And then there are people who really embrace what the outcomes are, which is you're getting the data supply chain closer to our product. Again, think about a deposit account. It's not physical at all. Totally digital, for the most part. Totally digital, completely driven by data. And so what we're doing is we're taking that entire value stream of being able to deliver something to our customer and saying, hey, you own the platform, you own the process, you also own your data interfaces. Data products are a part or one of those interfaces, right? There's other interfaces that are a part of Mesh, like your APIs or your events. And what we do is just a part of it. There are other teams at the bank that focus on delivering those other interfaces to our domains. But again, the people are at the center of it. So this is just a funny thing that it was a real thing that happened. Our general ledger went from an on-prem system to a SaaS provider. And we have a lot of users at our company that use our ledger data, our accounts payable data. We drive our cost center hierarchy and organizational hierarchy off of this system as well. So the analytical reach is really big for something like this. And so they were one of our first core banking platforms to modernize. And as part of a modernization, you build your data products. So we were on this big call just kind of introducing what we were doing. And the data product owners were talking through what was going to be offered. And, they're like, oh, it's going to be in Snowflake, and you're just going to access Snowflake just like you would our enterprise data warehouse. And then we look at the chat, and someone goes, we think we've done a good job over 2 years of talking and talking and talking and talking, so much talking about our data strategy. And then we see this, right? What is Snowflake? Does anyone know? I don't know if you know what Business Objects is, but it's a tool that we have a really big footprint of it. It is very widely used by our very low-code business users. So to see someone say, what is Snowflake? I don't know. I think it's a Business Objects replacement. Yeah, it's a tool to get data from multiple places. No, not at all. No. So we were both on that call, and I think Ben was the one that screenshotted this. Obviously, names are concealed. But it was just, it hit us, and this was probably 6-7 months ago at this time. There's not enough communication that you can do. And so for us, it's been, how do we just hit it from a bunch of different angles? And this is kind of what we've built over, a lot of this has actually been Ben building this over the last 12-ish months to figure out different ways to reach people and different ways to bring people along in our Mesh modernization, whatever you want to call it, journey. And so at the foundation of that it's the buy-in. So this is like the dog and pony show. It has to be done. Here's our data strategy. Here's what we want to do. Here's the business outcomes that it's going to provide. That is the hard part. As technologists, we want to talk about your tech outcomes. Oh, you can deliver analytics so much quicker, or use less compute. Those are things that don't matter to someone in the line of business. The person in the line of business wants to hear, you can own 100% of your data and make profitability decisions this much quicker. Or you can make decisions on how to de-risk your product this much quicker. Or you can work with your operations team better to fine-tune your product delivery process. So it kind of we had to flip the narrative of how we were talking about it, because at the end of the day, the business doesn't give a shit about what dbt is or what Snowflake is. They care about the outcomes that it's driving, not the tech outcomes, but the business outcomes. And then, of course, education. So like I said, part of it's a dog and pony show. Some of it is picking and choosing the places that you're going to invest in. But the buy-in, the branding, the marketing, the consistency of messaging, words matter, is a really big part of the foundation. So people know what it is. Now they have to get ready for it. Staffing is hard. We're really constrained right now from a staffing perspective. We have worked, so Ben leads our engineering, data engineering center of excellence, and kind of owns that function. And so what his team has built out is kind of like a best practices plan. If you're going to build a federated data engineering team, maybe go to market to look for these people. Or if you have people already on your team that fit these profiles, let's figure out a way to reinvest in them to upskill. Another thing that we just started, which is also his brainchild, is an early career pipeline program where we're going to start with 5 people right out of college that have a promising developer mindset, put them on my teams, develop them through Snowflake, dbt, some of our modeling and architecture best practices for about 4 to 6 months, and then get them ready to pop out into those federated teams to just seed the talent, right? So it's not just about telling people, it was about telling people what they had to hire. Now we're trying to actually invest in those people that then we're okay with popping them out into those organizations to help seed what they're trying to do. So now you got people, you got to do something. This is another one that I think we've continued to change and flex and make investments. Another one of Ben's brainchildren.
Should I be speaking?
Yeah, do you want the mic? It is like creative training. So we're in Cincinnati. A lot of our staff is based out of Cincinnati. We have we're really close in proximity to University of Cincinnati and Xavier. So we've partnered with University of Cincinnati. They've actually custom built data producer and data consumer. We call it Launchpad. It's like a 2-week program where they either have professors or they outsource to other learning and development groups. They've actually custom built like a DBT training for us using our technology, using our network. Like it's a little bit more fine-tuned to Fifth Third and what a typical DBT developer would see at our company. So if you're new to data engineering staff and you're going to join one of these federated teams, we recommend that you join one of these boot camps. Peer programming, I'll actually talk about in partnership. So trust. It's just trust. We have worked really hard to build trust in what we're trying to do with our stakeholders who are vastly uncomfortable with this pace of change and the type of change it is. Because if you're thinking about it, we're taking what we used to do and we're like, you're going to do it. So it's a scope increase, it's a cost increase, but there are business outcomes to be associated with it. And so creating that trust and being really transparent and having hard conversations and focusing on what we've done, even from a backlog perspective, like tactical backlog perspective, is that line of business owns the feature or the epic, and we all work on it together. So like I have teams that'll pull from that feature. We actually share outcomes and have dual accountability for data products being created, at least at the start. And then the last piece, which is the piece that I am the most proud of, is our professional services and peer programming team. So call it a tribe, just my product team is 3 teams focused on tech, 2 teams focused on peer programming. And what these teams do is we identify the high priority federated use cases. We pop them in there for however long they need to be there to help them achieve the business goals, build real sustainable skill sets in that team that are going to last, because the data products need to last too. So this is an area where like all of these require investment, but I think it stems from our recognition that in order to do this and actually be successful in doing this and for it to stick and for it to be the way that we do data 5 to 10 years from now, this has to be our main focus, right? The tech has to be there, the process has to be there. Those things will continue to lessen the amount of investment we need in these spaces because hopefully the process gets easier, but this is where it has to be right now. Cool. All right, so I will mostly wrap us up with the exception of one slide. Crazy optimism. It's still there. We're still optimistic. We're having fun. But some of our lessons learned, meet people where they're at. First time I went into a use case, first one I ever did, where we were going to build out one of these federated teams. So many emotions, I just completely shut down, right? I hate that kind of stuff, especially in meetings when I'm not prepared for it. And we all had to retune to when we had these sessions, when we talk about this, meeting people where they're at and expect emotional reactions because change is hard. From a process standpoint, prioritize what makes sense. We can't go after everything. So to Ben's point, we have to pick and choose the things that are going to move the needle to make it easier for people, to let us achieve our outcomes, to let the business achieve our outcomes. And it's a constant, I think we're not on a quarterly cycle anymore. We plan every 4 sprints. We're on an 8-week cycle. Every 8 weeks, retuning that prioritization rack and stack of where are we investing in the process, where are we investing in the technology, how are we deploying to people, right? Every 8 weeks, every 4 sprints, constantly retuning. Leverage technology that solves your problems. We didn't go all in at once. We're still not all in. We will live in a multi-architecture world for probably the next half a decade, if not longer. We pick and chose to build and buy where it made sense for us and what our industry requires. We pick and chose where to build and buy and invest based on the type of users that we have. So just take a step back and look at your organization and look at what is achievable and what the priority needs to be.
Awesome. Thanks, Kayleigh. So hopefully everybody heard a couple nuggets in there at least that you can take, depending on where you are in your journey. We thought we'd do one final question to our friend ChatGPT before we ramp down. So what's everybody think the answer is going to be? Top data transformation tool to use?
Boom.
Bam.
Got him.
So again, it's right.
Paid actor.
Of course.
Paid
right?
actor.
I mean, we're not paid, so but again, make it actionable, right? Which again is how we've treated this along the way from our people, process, and technology side. So appreciate everybody coming today. Thank you very much.
Thanks.